Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, December 21st, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the approval ratings of Joe Biden and why I really think this is one of the major reasons why he won the 2020 presidential election. So we all know back in 2016 that we discussed the election as an election between two evils. The lesser of two evils was chosen between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in a number of states, and overall Donald Trump was victorious. But Hillary Clinton still managed to be more approved of than Donald Trump, but both of them were severely disapproved of nationwide. We can actually take a look at the 2016 election data based off the favorability ratings. You see that Hillary Clinton in blue has been consistently throughout the entire 2016 campaign season above Donald Trump. However, if you take a look at the margins on the left, you will see that it's pretty much always been in the negative. Only in October of 2015 was Hillary Clinton even close to being approved of. Throughout the entire election cycle, she had never once been in the positive, and neither had Donald Trump. Donald Trump had always been in the negative, even leading up to the election when he was disapproved of at a net negative 21%. But Hillary Clinton may have been ahead of Donald Trump, but she was still at negative 13 points nationwide. We all know that there were so many third-party votes that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton didn't even receive 50% of the popular vote share. Now, it's expected with one candidate winning the popular vote that only one of them would be over 50%, but the fact that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 2 points with 48.6% of the vote is super significant. Donald Trump only won 46% of the vote. It wasn't as if this was a 51% to 49% election. Neither candidate was able to reach that 50% threshold because both of them were so insanely disliked, even more so than what you actually might expect for this election, which is exactly why I think that Joe Biden really had something that was different for this election. We can actually take a look at the election results based off the popular vote, and you will see that Gary Johnson and Jill Stein had one of their best election performances for their respective parties in United States history. Gary Johnson received 3.28% of the vote. It may not seem like a lot, but 4.5 million people voted for the Libertarian Party. The Green Party received 1.5 million votes, 1% of the entire popular vote. Even Evan McCulloch, who entered into the race very, very close to the election, whose most prominent performance was in Utah when he won 20% of the vote in that state, he received nearly 1 million votes. And I think it's just fascinating that there were so many votes cast for third-party candidates, largely because the top two contenders were disliked. And we all know how that election ended up. Donald Trump won with 306 electoral votes, but can you imagine what would have happened if Hillary Clinton was just slightly more approved of, especially amongst the white working class? She really took a hit in terms of approval after she served in the Obama administration. I have no doubt that she would have won this election had she just remained a senator from the state of New York and not ran in 2008 and ran in 2016. I would have had no doubt that she would have won that nomination and won the election. But her time under the Obama administration was exactly what was used against her. You didn't see them using her Senate record too often. It wasn't that long of a Senate record, but you wouldn't have been able to tie her to Benghazi. You wouldn't have been able to tie her to the email scandal. A lot of things that she was attacked for, vilified for, you wouldn't have been able to attack her for. And I think this election, 2016, would have gone a lot more smoother because her approval rating was high as she served as Secretary of State. But for Joe Biden, he served as Barack Obama's vice president, and his approval rating only took a dip around April, May of 2020. This was a time period where Biden still was above Donald Trump, but we saw this push from the Democratic Party, and it was such a beautifully orchestrated side of the Biden campaign that I thought that would be it for Donald Trump, and in a way it was. The DNC didn't focus so much on being really anti-Trump. Obviously, there was that whole messaging that Trump was dangerous for this country. That was exactly what the DNC got across. However, that was not the main focus. You see, the main focus of the Biden campaign through the entire campaign cycle was pretty much voting out Donald Trump, was pretty much fixing the economy, pretty much fixing COVID-19. But at the DNC, they didn't focus entirely on that. Most of the DNC was about Joe Biden and Joe Biden. And the reason for that was because of the fact that Joe Biden knew entering into this that his approval rating was still in the negative. And as they went through the convention, immediately after, Joe Biden's approval rating went up into the positive. In fact, it's the highest it's ever been. Election day was the highest it's ever been, with one exception. The highest it had ever been throughout the entire campaign cycle. And you see, when you're serving as the vice president under a president who left with a 55% approval rating, he was in turn supposed to be popular. But it took a hit during the primary season. Democrats and Republicans disliked him. But after we saw that convention where the entire focus of it was that Joe Biden is this good person. Joe Biden is this sensible person. Joe Biden is this person who's down to earth. The RNC did not focus on that. I watched the days of all the DNC and all of the RNC. You know, I live tweeted the DNC. I didn't feel it was necessary for the RNC because I didn't really see anything that was different than what we saw in 2016. The 2020 DNC was very different. The 2020 DNC was not so much focused on being more so anti-Trump, but sort of a character-building idea, a character-building convention for the Biden campaign. And it worked because immediately following that convention, Joe Biden's approval rating remained in the positive through the rest of the next few months leading up to the election. Did Donald Trump's change? Marginally, but nothing super significant. Biden went from a low point around May of 2020 being negatively approved of by 5.9% to being approved of by 7 points. That's a huge swing. You know, -6 to 7 points positive is a huge swing. That's a 13-point swing. Let's compare Donald Trump's low points to his high point. -18% up to -11%. That's a 7-point swing. Donald Trump didn't see any type of significant shift the same way that Joe Biden did. And considering how close the election actually was, I truly believe that favorability played a very important role. And also, when you look at the fact that there are no faithless electors this election, also tells you that this was not choosing the lesser of two evils. You see, the Bernie Sanders campaign was really trying to avoid a repeat of the 2016 election where Bernie Sanders would get close to winning the nomination, but end up losing it to what would be a failed Democratic nominee. But since Joe Biden was approved of by much higher amounts than Hillary Clinton, that was not necessarily going to happen. You see, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party warned the centrist wing that if they were to run a very similar candidate to the same one that they ran in 2016, that they were destined to lose the election. Then COVID-19 hit. And then the Biden campaign went on a mission to pretty much rebrand the Biden family, rebrand Joe Biden as a candidate. And it worked. And it was enough so that he was able to win over suburban voters. You see, suburban voters are very difficult for the Democratic Party to win. A lot of them are pro-life. A lot of them are very traditional values. However, Donald Trump didn't do any of this character sculpting campaign methods. You see, he was focused on, quote, telling it how it is. The Trump campaign did not censor itself, whether through their ads, whether through his tweets, whether through their rallies. It didn't matter. The Trump campaign was big on not being politically correct because that's what worked in 2016. You can't fault them for trying to use the same playbook as 2016. But they failed to recognize that the suburbs shifted away from them, even in 2016. There were areas where they did very well amongst the suburban vote. And I think that's largely due to the fact that Hillary Clinton was viewed as an immoral candidate, a lying candidate. You know, someone who wasn't, and you probably hate to hear this, but a woman in the White House. You do have to realize that there still are sexist voters across America. I don't think she lost solely because of that reason, but you can't imagine someone who doesn't think that a woman should serve would even help her in any way. But when you're looking at Joe Biden as a candidate, he didn't have many of these things tackled onto him. The only thing that Trump really called him was Sleepy Joe. And when that messaging didn't work specifically among senior voters this election, I don't know why that was a playbook, especially amidst a global pandemic, trying to pander to a base that's disproportionately affected by the pandemic, which is being labeled as mismanaged by the current administration. I don't know why that was something that was the first thing that came to mind when the Trump campaign tried to attack Joe Biden, even through the election cycle, as COVID hit. But when you're looking at the suburban shift away from Donald Trump, I think this largely had to do with the fact that Joe Biden was still a likable candidate. Hillary Clinton was not. Donald Trump was not necessarily a likable candidate. The numbers tell us that he wasn't liked whatsoever. -11 nationwide on election day. Biden was +7. That is a 17-point difference. And given how close the election was, I truly believe that the approval rating and the likability of Joe Biden and this character campaign that the Biden campaign pushed through the DNC onward was what was one of the main reasons why Joe Biden won the election. And I'm not going to deny that there was a huge involvement from people of color in this election, but I do think this is something that also added on to it. Because when you look at Joe Biden as a person, he was very different than Hillary Clinton. He was not nearly as scandal-plagued. Even now, the only thing they can tie Joe Biden to is his son. Think about that for a moment. Hillary Clinton was vilified for her emails. She was vilified for Benghazi. She was vilified for anything she had done under the Obama administration. And she was, of course, tied to her husband. But had she not been a part of the Obama administration, that would probably have been the only thing that could have tied her to something extremely negative. For Joe Biden, they have nothing personally on him. They have Senate records from back in the 80s. They have statements from back in the 80s that were taken out of context, which is exactly why they didn't work. The only thing that Donald Trump even attacked Joe Biden for at the debates was not his performance as vice president, because America liked Obama's performance, even through the 2016 election. It was his son. It was his family. It was things that Joe Biden was not necessarily directly tied into, which is exactly why those messages did not work nearly as well as the Biden campaign trying to just reform this idea that Joe Biden is a down-to-earth, average American person. And, him as a politician, Joe Biden, he's a career politician. He's been in there for 40 years. But based off what we saw at both conventions, it seemed as if more so that Donald Trump was the insider in the election. I mean, he is the incumbent president. You can't say he's an outsider at this point. He served in the White House for 4 years. He's at the highest position known possible for any politician in the entire country. But for Joe Biden, despite being in the Senate for decades, serving as vice president for 8 years, his campaign really resonated with a lot of voters, and I think that's what ultimately helped him amongst key suburban areas. But he also won on the backs of minority voters. They led him to victory. And it also can't hurt with the fact that, Joe Biden was Obama's VP. That helped him in terms of some demographic groups. Now, overall, Donald Trump did gain in terms of minority support, but in terms of inspiration to vote, we saw much higher turnout in majority black cities, which, yes, Donald Trump received a higher percent of the vote, but Joe Biden overwhelmingly received more of the raw vote share. Hundreds of thousands of more votes from Milwaukee, from Philadelphia, from Detroit that helped Joe Biden solidify his election victory. When you're looking back at Hillary Clinton's approval rating, sure, it was above Donald Trump, but just by 8 points, and they were both negative double digits. Only one of the candidates this election, 2020, was in the negative double digits, and it was not Joe Biden. Joe Biden remained in the positive following the Democratic National Convention, which was a character campaign, and it worked. It helped Joe Biden win the presidency. That's insane. If we're comparing the 2016 versus 2020 approval rating, Donald Trump started out in the plus right up to that convention, and immediately following, Joe Biden took the lead. Joe Biden did significantly better than Hillary Clinton. Taking a look at the favorability rating, Trump versus Biden, throughout the entire campaign, Joe Biden had been in the positive. The entire campaign, Joe Biden had been in the positive. But it really wouldn't mean much if he was only approved of by 3 points more. So, being approved of by 19 points more, well, that's a different story. And in terms of Trump versus Clinton, we can actually compare right here. Trump versus Biden. Biden was up 19 points. Clinton was only up by 8.4%. That's an 11-point difference. People did not view this election as the lesser of two evils. People viewed this election as Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. It was back to what we saw between Romney and Obama. Back to what we saw between McCain and Obama. Even Bush versus Kerry. I think Gore and Bush was probably the last election where we had a lesser of two evils situation. That election was exceptionally close on both sides. That 2000 election was one of the closest elections in United States history. Look at the margins. Look at California. 12 points for Al Gore. Oregon, 0.4. Wisconsin, 0.2, which isn't too surprising now. But for back then, it was pretty surprising given that in 1996, it was won by 10 points. So that was a pretty significant swing. Look at the blue to red, blue to red. West Virginia going from being a solid Democratic state, I know that's weird to hear, solid Democratic state to being a pretty solid Republican state. In 2004, this wasn't a lesser of two evils situation, but the Democratic Party also saw significant decreases in terms of their vote. Hawaii went to carry by just 8 points, 8.7%, California by single digits. That's fascinating. But fast forward to this election, a lot of states have solidified. But when you're looking at the Rust Belt, when you're looking at where Joe Biden did better, specifically amongst suburban groups and also driving up turnout amongst minority voters, a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that he was the approved of candidate. He was the one that was actually liked by Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in the positive. A 49.9% approval rating, we can round up to 50% compared to a 42% approval rating. That's a very big decrease, a very big increase, very big difference. Sorry. And in terms of the unfavorability rating, Donald Trump being at 53% compared to Joe Biden at 53%, you definitely can't see how that would help Donald Trump in any way. So overall, with the election that was won by just a narrow margin, every single thing matters. And I think if Joe Biden had a similar approval rating or lack thereof for Hillary Clinton, he probably would not have won the election. Joe Biden's victory was crucial because of the fact that he won on minority voters, he won with white voters, and he did so by being liked more than Hillary Clinton. This was not the election of lesser than two evils. It was just a standard election, which is why we saw very few third-party votes and no faithless electors, somewhat back to normal. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On this screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.